Yep,
we can start. Okay.
Yeah, you slide on. Your face not on.
Okay. Good day, viewers.
Yeah.
I am.
We can start. Yeah, go ahead.
I am Terry Balgobin, and this is Mr. Ravi Narayan. We are both agricultural assistant tools attached to the La Reunion Plant Propagation Station under the Agricultural Services Division of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. Apart from our station, there is also St. Augustine Nurseries, Mapa Farm, and the National Seed Bank, which are all under the Agricultural Services Division. Right? For the past few weeks, you all have been given presentations on how these plants are propagated, how they are grown, avocado, breadfruit. So today we are going to try to help you all how to plant and how to care for these plants, right? So in the photos displayed are a few examples of fruit trees grown on the station as part of our germplasm collection, right? So at La Reunion, we have cocoa, coconut, breadfruit, balata, mango, many varieties, right? And some people may want to say, well, what is germplasm? So just for clarification, germplasm is a term used to describe the seeds, plants, or plant parts useful in crop breeding, research, and conservation. Right. Here we have a list of fruit trees for sale at La Reunion Plant Propagation Station. Right, the list is fairly extensive. I mean, we have a wide variety of different minor fruits, as well as mango, avocado, and of course, cocoa and breadfruit. Right, the cost per plant is $25 per plant for the general public, and if you are a registered farmer and purchasing 50 plants or more, you can get the plants at $15 per plant. Right. Plants are available all year round at the station. For further information regarding the list of plants available, you can visit the ministry's website or Facebook page. The list of plants available is updated on a monthly basis. Right. So now we're going to what we are going to discuss today, the agronomic practices for fruit trees. Right. So firstly, we are going to talk about site selection, selection of planting material, preparing the planting hole, actually planting a fruit tree, irrigation and drainage, fertilizing, weed control, mulching, pruning. We'll touch a little bit on pest and disease management and also de-shooting. Right. So we'll start with site selection. Most fruit trees require full sunlight. Right? You need to ensure proper drainage. The soil type may determine the level of land preparation and drainage which is required. Choose trees that suit the available space. Some fruit trees can have a productive life of up to 20 years. Therefore, a lot of foresight and planning must be done before planting. Right? Ensure that fruit trees are planted at least 15 to 20 feet away from structures. Ensure there are no overhead or underground lines. In particular, ensure that trees are not planted too close to septic or sewer systems. Right? Also, in limited spaces, you can select grafted or dwarf variety of plants. That is specifically for householders. I mean, you have a backyard, very limited space. You would tend to want to select a plant to suit your space, right? With regards to the last point, which is Ensure that trees are not planted too close to septic or sewer systems. It is a common mistake that fruit trees are planted too close to sewer systems. Over time, the tree roots will get into the system. And although in most cases the tree may grow well, the roots will eventually clog up the septic system and it will cost you more in the long run. Right? Right. Selection of planting material. When selecting a plant to be planted, you want to look for a fruit tree that is around 2 to 3 feet tall, have an intact growing tip showing signs of new growth. Right? The leaves should be free from pest and disease damage. The roots should not be growing out of the grow bag. And if the plant is grafted, the union should be well intact. Right. Now we'll discuss a little bit about the actual preparing of the planting hole, right? When planting a fruit tree, you normally want to make the planting hole at least 1.5 times the depth and the width of the plant's root ball. We have a diagram in the next slide there you see, and you'll actually see what we refer to as the root ball and how to measure it and the size the hole accordingly, right? To add to the hole, you want to prepare a mixture of manure and soil in a ratio of 1 to 2 that could be used to refill the hole. And generally a soil test is normally suggested, but in the absence of a soil test, you could mix 100 grams to 200 grams or a quarter to a half pound of limestone and 30 to 40 grams or 1 to 1.5 ounces of 12-24-12 into the soil and manure mixture. Right. So planting of a fruit tree, you need to select and prepare the site before planting. So we have some photos here illustrating, the site was already selected and we use a cutlass, a swiper to clear the site, right? Right. So earlier I referred to the planting hole being 1.5 times the depth and width of the root ball, right? So basically the root ball, I'm gonna skip ahead here, right? Right. So basically this diagram here illustrates the root ball. So the root ball is the center here, which is the plant roots with the soil that is attached to it, that is normally inside a polythene bag, right? When you purchase plants, you get it in a plastic bag, the polythene bag, right? So this is what we refer to as the root ball, right? The mass that contains the soil and the roots in here, right? So normally when you're digging the hole, you want to ensure that the hole is 1.5 times in depth and width. So here we measure the bag being 8 inches. So we went ahead and we dug the hole to be 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide, right? Now, the reason why you want to do this is you want to ensure that there is adequate space for when this root ball starts to send out new, young, vigorous roots, that the area is loose so that it would have something that it could grow faster in and penetrate into the soil, right? A key tip when transplanting plants also is not to water the plants at least a day before, right? This helps for the root ball to stay intact. I'm sure some people might have purchased a plant, you're going to transplant it, you water it before. If you water the plant and you remove the bag, the soil becomes loose. So what would happen? It will tend to crumble and fall apart. So by not watering the plants at least a day before, it helps to keep the soil intact, right? Right. So this is some photos here illustrating how we actually go about planting the plant, right? You remove the grow bag from around the root ball of the plant before placing into the hole. Add manure and fertilizer if available, and lift the plant by the root ball and gently place into the hole. Now this key part here, lift the plant by the root ball and gently place into the hole, also ties in with the previous little tip, which is not to water the plant at least a day before, because by holding the plant by the root ball, you're actually keeping the ball intact. I mean, we have seen it before. I mean, some people maybe actually experience that you're going to plant that plant, you hold it by the stem. By the time you reach into the plant and hold it, the root ball fall apart, half of the soil fall out. You end up planting a half bare rooted plant, right? So, I mean, these are two little tips to ensure that you don't have that happening, right? Right. So, after you remove the bagged fertilizer, then you place the plant into the hole. Right. After the plant is placed into the hole, you want to balance the plant upright in the center of the hole. Refill the hole with the soil to the root ball height and press firmly. Right. Stake the plant if needed. Right. Some plants, depending on the size of the plants you get to purchase, may not require staking. But if the plant is, I mean, to the taller end, around 3 feet, and you plant it in an open area that is exposed to wind, it is generally recommended that you do stake the plant to help support the plant so that it wouldn't topple over or break, right? Here we have a little video showing how we normally tie plants when staked at our station, right? I mean, there are different variations to doing this, but this is basically how we do it, right? So you pass the string. Within this video, we're using string, or you could use cloth. You make a loop, then you take it to the stake and tie it off to the stake, right? You could either tie it in a permanent knot, or you could tie it in a quick release knot like this. I mean, we normally do like this in case you want to tie it over. But the main thing is you want to ensure that there is adequate space when tying the plant, so that when the plant continues to grow, you will not restrict the growth of the plant. Right. After planting the plant and staking if required, it is recommended that you mulch around the plant and then water to keep moist. In the photos here, I mean, at La Reunion, we try to be to use what we have at our station. We have rotted immortal, so we use that as a form of mulch on our station. So that's what we use here to mulch this plant after planting it and then watering. Right. So we come to irrigation and drainage. Water is critical to the survival of the plant immediately after planting. And for the first 2 to 3 months, plants should be watered at least twice per week. Irrigation of plants in the dry periods is required to maintain growth and productivity. Drainage is also very important. What drainage is? Basically, drainage is the removal of excessive water from around the plant, right? This could be done both naturally or artificially by the actual construction of drains, right? Right. So fertilizing. Essential nutrients boost plant growth. The major nutrients required are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen is required for stem and leaf growth and development. Phosphorus is basically for root growth and development, and potassium is needed for fruiting and flowering, right? We have an example of a fertilizer, NPK 12-24-12, that was used previously in the planting hole. The reason why 12-24-12 was selected is because the middle number, the phosphorus content, is higher, right? This has 24% phosphorus as compared to nitrogen and potassium. So we normally refer to this as being a rooting salt, right? In the chart here, we have fertilizer recommended rates for a breadfruit tree, right? So basically, during the different growth stages of the plant, different fertilizer requirements are needed, right? So for the first year of growing, you would want to apply 100 to 150 grams or 4 to 5 ounces of 12-24-12 per tree, right? Over every 4 months. In the second year, until flowering starts, you apply 300 grams or 11 ounces of 20-10-10 per tree once every 4 months, right? Bearing trees and onwards, you apply a total of 1,000 grams or 35 ounces per tree per year of 12-12-17-2 at the flowering, and after at the flowering is 750 grams or 27 ounces and 250 grams or 9 ounces after harvesting is completed, right? Now we touched basically on the major nutrients, right? Now throughout the life of any plant, they would also need micronutrients as well. So normally micronutrients can be applied through foliar applications, right? And you would want to use the manufacturer's recommendations. And you could do this at least 3 times per year. Right. Actual applying the fertilizer. Now, when applying fertilizer, it's key that you want to apply the fertilizer along what we refer to as the drip circle, right? Now, basically, we have a tree here, and you see we have an area here we refer to the drip circle, right? Now, the drip circle basically is the area around the circumference of the canopy of the tree. So the reason why we want to apply the fertilizer here is because you would normally have moisture available here, and fertilizer and moisture go hand in hand because this plant is only able to utilize this fertilizer through the moisture, right? That is how it is able to absorb it through the roots. So that is why this is one of the key points in applying fertilizer. You want to apply it to the drip circle or the drip zone, right? Excessive dosage of fertilizer would cause scorching of leaves of the plants, right? So you don't want, yes, fertilizer is good. You need fertilizer. You want to use fertilizer, but you don't want to use it too frequently or too much. Otherwise, you could end up with a plant like this here with scorching of the leaves, right? Weed control. Weeds have a pest and compete with the plant for nutrients and water. Weed control can be done manually, mechanically, or chemically. Mulching. Mulching helps maintain soil moisture and control weeds. Here are some examples of different materials that can be used for mulch, right? You could use leaves, like by us, we use rotted wood, dry grass, wood shavings, and you could also use synthetic mulches. I mean, things like newspapers, polythene. There's even commercial ground covering or mulches for sale. Pruning. Pruning is done to maintain desired plant shape, to encourage fruiting and bearing. It also allows proper erosion. Pruning, you want to remove dead, diseased branches immediately. Whilst pruning, you want to use sharp tools to make clean cuts, and you want to treat surfaces with appropriate fungicides after you have made these cuts, right? Right. So if you could just look at the diagram here. So the first one basically you show a tree that has not been pruned. Now the red highlights the branches that you would want to remove. And after you have pruned here, this is what it would look like. So basically what you would have done is you would have removed some of the lateral and bilateral branches, right? To help with the aeration within the plant. Right? Keynote here, so we're looking, the middle diagram here basically is the same as the first, right? And to the extreme right, where we're actually seeing how to prune our plant is, we have 2 examples here, right? So the first one here with the red cicature, we are showing how to actually cut our branch, right? Now, when pruning, you want to ensure that you don't cut into the color of the branch, right? Now, basically the color of the branch, I don't know if you can see when I point with the mouse here, is where this red line is here, right? You want to cut away from the bark of the tree. So you'll end up with a cut like this, so the color will remain. A common mispractice is that people end up cutting into the back or the ridge of the tree. When you do that, you are opening up the tree for infection, and also you may humbug the flow within the actual trunk of the tree, right? So a keynote, and you could have breakage, right? So the key thing is you want to cut and leave the branch color. Also, in cutting, to prevent breakage, a normal practice is if it's a bigger branch, you want to make multiple cuts, right? So you will cut more than one time to reduce the weight on the branch. And also, in cutting, you would want to make an undercut first. So if you could see the mouses here, you make an undercut first, and then you cut from the top. So that is to prevent the bark from breaking after actually tearing into the trunk of the tree, right? And like we said before, when pruning, you want to use sharp, clean tools and make these cuts. And after cutting, you want to make sure and apply appropriate fungicide to prevent any infection, right? So these are some photos here demonstrating, some of the tools and pruning done on our station, right? So we could use, apart from things like, so you could use a power saw, extendable shears, secateurs, and pole saw, right? The size of the branches and the level of pruning that is required would determine the tools that would be needed, right? A key thing also in Trinidad that we use pruning for, apart from actually maintaining the plant shape, the fruiting and bearing capacity, and the help for aeration, is also to remove, well, we will touch on pest and disease in a little while, is that it is also used to remove what we would call parasitic plants and also epiphytes, right? One of the most common parasitic plants we have in general is something referred to as bird vine, right? And one of the easiest way, right? One of the appropriate, right? And the appropriate way to control bird vines is by pruning or removing it, right? You remove the infected stem or prune off heavily infected branches, right? So now I'll hand you over to Mr. Narayan, who will touch on pest and disease management.
Good afternoon, everyone. For fruit trees, pest and disease management, we start off with integrated pest management, which is basically a long word for different practices in terms of pest management. The first we will touch on is cultural practices, which is the use of resistant varieties. When we say resistant varieties, there are some plants or that have varieties that might be tolerant or resistant to certain pests or certain diseases. The more common one we would deal with is like cocoa. We have cocoa varieties that are resistant to witch's broom or blackbud. We also have tillage, and tillage is a cultural practice which would improve soil aeration, improve drainage. You have mulching, as Terry spoke of before, which reduces the impact of weeds and also preserves moisture in the soil. And there's also, all right, for the pests part, you have hand picking of the insects and also removal of the weeds. The trellising we have here is not so much for the fruit trees, but you find that, as you say, some of the trees might be a little softer, or when you plant them, you will have to put some support, and trellising is the scientific term for adding support to plants. The next part of IPM, or integrated pest management, is biological control, which is the use of living organisms to suppress pest population. The most common one most people would know is the ladybird or the ladybug, as you would see in the photo here, right? We have a picture of the ladybug beetle, which would be feeding on the mealybug population, right? A lot of fruit trees, particularly breadfruit, is susceptible to mealybug. infestation. So without you or without the householder or the farmer doing anything, you will find that the ladybird will find these mealybug populations and reduce it, right? So that is very important to keep in mind when we move to the next one, which is chemical control, where you use pesticides, fungicides, and bactericides to control pests and diseases. Now, if you observe on your fruit trees, you have the ladybird eating the mealybug, you should refrain from using chemical control, or you can use insecticides which are friendly to the ladybird. One example is a neem-based insecticide, right? But chemical control also, like for the householder, can include a simple mixture as soap water, which kind of controls most of your simple pests, like maybe the aphids and so those sucking insects that would attack your fruit trees. But there are also more specific pesticides and fungicides. Some examples of the more common pests that affect fruit trees. If we start with lacebug, this affects avocado trees. I am sure you would have seen most avocado trees throughout the country right now. In some stage or another, you will see a lot of scorching on the leaves. That is caused by the lacebug feeding on the sap of the leaves, which it feeds on the underside of the leaf and cause the surface of the leaf to appear scorched. Like if, like you spray some herbicide or weedicide on it and it gets a brown, like a dying discoloration. In severe cases, there's heavy leaf fall, so you will find the entire tree would shed all its leaves, like all the leaves will drop off, and because of that now, that directly affects how much fruits or how many fruits the plant can produce, right? One of the recommended control is an insecticide containing imidacloprid, which is the name of the active ingredient, right? And that is a systemic insecticide that you can spray onto the avocado tree to control this pest. Another major pest, I think, of all fruit trees and also vegetables and most of your plants on the whole would be batchaks. Batchak affects all fruit trees. They cut off young leaves of the tree, which could lead to your low yield or even death, right? If sometimes you plant your fruit tree and then maybe you don't go back for a few days, and when you go back, all you see are the stems remaining. That is more than likely batchak would have passed and in the night, because they move mostly in the night, and they would eat off all the young tender leaves, right? The best thing is if you could follow the batchak when they come out in the night to find the nests and maybe use an insecticide to control the nests. But there's also a batchak bait that you could put around the fruit tree when you plant it, so that the batchak will actually take this bait into the nest, and that kind of helps to control the population of the batchak. A main disease of fruit trees is called tree decline or dieback. It affects breadfruit and avocado trees primarily, but you will see it in most other fruit trees. It is caused by a combination of drought, waterlogging, and sometimes pathogens such as we have here Rosalina species, Phytophthora, and nematodes. Some of the symptoms are heavy leaf fall, fruit fall, and dieback of branches. The dieback, you would more see it, if you look at the picture here, you would see the branches start to die from the tip backwards. That's why it's called dieback, right? It doesn't start from like the root or the base of the stem going upwards, right? One of the measures to control or restrict this is cutback or pruning of the branches, which would promote new growth. And also you could apply limestone to the surface of the soil to delay symptoms if it is caused by pathogens, which would be normally occurring in the rainy season, Phytophthora, and so by applying the limestone, you kind of create a barrier between the soil and the tree. Right, so Rosalina root rot. It affects all trees. Trees stop growing and develops yellow foliage and shriveled fruit. Right? Okay. Right. So the Rosalinea species, if you notice, this is the trunk of the tree and this is the soil here. And you get the root rot at the base of the stem, exactly where it comes into contact with the soil. How you will know the root rot is present, you might be able to actually take your hand and remove pieces of the bark because it gets soft and I wouldn't say mushy, but it gets soft and it's easy to remove, right? This root rot could kill the entire tree. So you have to be careful for this. The other disease is anthracnose or Coletotrichum species. This disease normally affects the fruit, right? Leaves also have some symptoms, but it is a disease that would normally cause losses of the fruit. A simple, how to say, way for you to picture it, I sure you would have purchased avocados, and especially in this last season that gone by, and sometime if you leave it, you see brown to blackish spots, circles on the surface of the avocado as it tend to ripe, right? More than likely, this is anthracnose, right? Some examples of pests of fruit trees. One important one, especially for people doing propagation, which is the ministry, and also private growers, is mango seed weevil. It is one of the, as I say, the most important pests and is widespread in most mango growing regions. The mango seed weevil is a very tiny weevil. It's almost the size of a pinhead, the adult, right? However, it lays its egg in the immature mango fruit. And as the fruit is developing, the weevil enters the seed. I am sure that you would have cut green mangoes or even ripe mangoes, and when you cut through the seed, you see something like this here, some black like dirt inside the seed and maybe a small larva, right? That is the mango seed weevil. Now, it does not affect the quality of the flesh so that you can still use the mangoes. However, the seed is killed and is unable to produce a new plant, right? So for propagation, the mango seed weevil is a significant pest. It is very difficult to control because the adult is nocturnal and feeds and moves about in the night. And then also because of the sizes of the mango trees, it's very difficult to spray because most of your insecticides would not be able to penetrate the young fruit. Right? Another pest of fruit trees is fruit flies. Fruit flies are common household pests and is also known for their small size, red eyes, and brown bodies. The most common fruit you would know affected by fruit fly is guava. As we see here, I'm sure many of you all have guava trees and are not able to even eat one guava because of fruit fly, because when you break it open, they're full of worms, right? We find it also starting to affect pomerac and many other local fruits, but guava is number one, right? There are some control for fruit fly. One is a pheromone trap. Some agro shops have it where you could buy, I think it's a colored trap and place it in the tree or close to the tree, and the fruit fly is attracted to that. And there is a little bar at the base that will, when the fruit fly goes to the trap, it will drown and die. Right? There are also some insecticides that you could use for control of the fruit fly. Okay, the last thing we want to discuss is de-shooting. Now, this is a scientific name for basically removal of unwanted shoots from the stem of the plant, especially from the, if it's a grafted plant, from the rootstock area, right? So de-shooting, the removal of rootstocks emerging from the rootstock, the removal of shoots emerging from the rootstock of budded and grafted fruit trees. First, we need to determine the bud or graft union. Now, in this small diagram here, right, if see a label here, this is the graft union. So what we're looking at is removal of any shoot that would have come from below that union, right? At the union here, anything below is called the rootstock, and anything above is called the scion. Now, the reason for grafting, as I'll just explain briefly, is the scion is from a desired plant that you want, whether it's for the quality of the fruit or the disease characteristics, something, right? But it's normally for the plant that you desire, you put onto, that's the scion, onto a rootstock. Now, the rootstock is required for the root system, which would be able to tolerate better waterlogged conditions or drought conditions, but the rootstock is chosen because of its ability to survive or adapt to the local growing conditions. So the rootstock now does normally be very vigorous. And when you put this new scion onto it, the rootstock still has a tendency to produce shoots that would want to overtake the scion. If you do not remove these shoots in a timely manner, they will become more powerful and eventually this scion will die. And that is the part that you would have desired and put onto the plant for your needs, so that if this dies, you no longer have the plant or you will get the fruit that you require. So this de-shooting is very critical, especially if you purchase a grafted plant in the few months immediately after planting out the plant. You need to monitor for removal of side shoots that would have come from the rootstock. Right, we have some pictures here to show. Well, we use a plan that we have on the station for demonstration, right? If you notice here, you would see branches, you would see more shoots, right? And what we do, we use a sharp knife and we carefully remove some of the side shoots. Eventually, if you notice, we move lower and down till you see the growing tip. Right, you would remember Terry would have said when you're purchasing or going to put a fruit plant, you look for one with an intact growing tip, right? So this growing tip here is intact, but if you notice on the stem, it's kind of difficult to see from the picture, but there are no side shoots below the graft union, which was about here, right? Everything here is clear. And as I say, once you plant it in the field, you need to keep monitoring. Like every so often, at least once a month, you make a pass, because you would find that shoots will tend to emerge from even below the soil level from the rootstock and come up, but they will come up with such vigor that if you don't remove them, the scion will die. Right? Thank you very much for participating in this presentation today, and we have a few questions we would like to start to address.
We only had one question from Jennifer Thompson.
Right. From Jennifer Thompson, Edo, if I pronounce the name correctly, please name an appropriate fungicide. I think that was to do with the pruning. All right. Normally, when you do the pruning and you have the cut surface, a fungicide that we normally recommend is a copper-based fungicide. These are very broad spectrum, and you mix it with a little bit of water into a paste. It's not like if you mix into spray the plant, you mix it into a thick paste, and you could use like a brush, or if you have on gloves, you could actually use that to apply it directly onto the cut surface of the tree.
That's the only question.
Okay, I think that's the only question. So once again, on behalf of Terry Balgobin, myself, Ravi Narayan, and the entire staff of La Reunion Plant Propagation Station, thank you and have a good day.
Good day, bro.